The Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. This is the testimony given by John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny it, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." Then they said to him, "Who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, why then are you baptizing if you are neither the Messiah, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" John answered them, "I baptize you with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know, the one who is coming after me. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal." This took place in Bethany, across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Grace, mercy, and peace to you from our God who creates us, redeems us, and makes us a holy people. Amen. Russell Baker, how many of you remember Russell Baker? He was a columnist for the New York Times. He wrote a memoir called Growing Up. In the book, he writes about his wife, Mimi. Mimi grew up as an orphan. She was on the receiving end of the charities in which we Christians and other well-intentioned folks involve ourselves this time of year. Baker writes, by the age of 14, Mimi was wise about the nature of public charities. The police came 2 or 3 times a week with bags of stale buns and rolls collected from Camden, New Jersey bakeries. Mimi noticed that the matron and her friends removed the choicest sweets for themselves before setting out the leftovers for the children. The Christmas parties were the worst humiliations. The decent people in town were full of Christmas goodwill and eager to do something for misbegotten children. So the inmates of the orphanage had to be trotted out on Christmas Day to stand in local gathering halls and look delighted while each was handed a small gift. Some Christmases, there were 3 or 4 parties a day at which the orphans were expected to beam with gratitude. And then he says, Mimi came to think of Christmas as an occasion when the well-to-do used life's losers to improve their day. Ouch. That sounds kind of harsh for those of us on the giving side of charity. And yet we have to admit that caring for the poor, feeding the hungry, even baking cookies for a cookie walk fundraiser, all that is what we do this time of year. Witness the amount of giving and caring and feeding and baking that you are doing this month. After all, caring and serving and generosity have emerged as some of TLC's core values in the discovery process we're engaged in right now. You do it even when it's not Christmas, and especially when we're not in a global pandemic. A lot of the inspiration for such giving and serving comes from the words we hear today in our first reading from the prophet Isaiah. These are also the very same words that Jesus reads in the temple when he begins his own ministry. One version goes like this: "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor." Our readings for Advent are full of prophetic cries for justice and righteousness, and full of promises that those cries for justice will be answered. John the Baptist comes today in our gospel to bear witness to that answer. And our acts of goodwill are the ways we participate with the prophets and with John the Baptist in preparing the way for that answer, for the reign of God, the reign that will bring in justice and righteousness. Today, our charity work, especially in this pandemic, can be a living reminder that the answer, the one who brings good news to the oppressed and brokenhearted, that one is already in our midst, helping us to hold fast to what is good, even these days when finding what is good seems harder and harder to do. But just so we don't find ourselves caught up among those well-to-do who use life's losers to improve our day, we would do well to pause, even in the midst of our caring and giving and feeding, to recognize that sometimes our need to give comes from our need to fill not our own empty stomachs, but our own empty hearts. We can give with an attitude of arrogance. That's what contributes to the cynicism we heard from Mimi. That comes when we approach our giving with an attitude of superiority. That sets up a reciprocity that keeps a cycle going, where we get locked into patterns or roles that don't change. And we have charity and we have dependence, and we have charity and we have dependence, and it keeps going. Or we can model our giving after Jesus, and we can give out of humility, which puts rich and poor alike, all of us, on the same plane. Greg Boyle is a Jesuit priest who is famous for his gang intervention programs in Los Angeles. He describes his work not as helping and not as charity, but as kinship, Kinship, kinship. Christian service, he says, is about our common calling to delight in one another. A nun from Arkansas named Macrina Wiederkehr gives us more to think about. She writes a poetic meditation in which she cries out to the whole world, but what is justice? And what is righteousness? And who is that hungry? The people called back, we are. We are the hungry. We have spent all our money on things that don't last. We are hungry with a hunger that is deep inside. We are hungry with a hunger that won't be silent. We are hungry for something whose name is everything virtuous, everything noble, everything true. We are hungry for all that matters, for all that is lasting, for all that is right. We are hungry for broken bread and answered prayers and kept promises. We are so hungry, cried the people. Then, trembling beneath the burden for such a hunger, I asked, what have you done to your prophets? The people grew silent and became a song. Then someone stepped out of the crowd. We are too sophisticated to stone our prophets, he said. And so we just ignore them, and our hunger deepens. If you are wondering what to pray for, we are hungry for new hearts. Macrina's meditation ends. I bowed my head in the city streets, and I wept with grief and joy. I announced good news to all who would listen, and the news was this: blessed are you if you are aware of so deep a hunger, for God will surely feed you. Today, we have all logged on to Zoom because we are aware of so deep a hunger. Who would put up with this otherwise? We help the poor and we feed the hungry, not to patronize, not to use life's losers to improve our day, but because we too are life's losers. We too are hungry, hungry for all that matters, hungry for all that is lasting, hungry for all that is right. We limp toward it here, for this fleeting and fragmented experience together in the presence of this community gathered virtually in far less than optimal conditions or circumstances, but where God is still at the center because God is God. And we are still in community around that center because we are church, even as our images show up only virtually on the screen in front of us. We will find all that matters, all that is lasting, and all that is right very soon in the manger. We will find all that someday again on the other side of the resurrection promised to us here, promised and present in broken bread, answered prayers, and kept promises. And so may we continue to give, and to give with humble hearts, not to, but with our kinfolk. And in that kinship of mutual giving, of caring and serving, may God always Make our hearts new. Amen.